There comes a moment in the life of a chosen one when everything that once felt stable begins to tremble. It doesn't always start with something dramatic. Sometimes it begins with a quiet discomfort, a subtle inner voice whispering that something is not aligned anymore. You may wake up one morning with a strange awareness, as if a veil has been lifted from your eyes. The conversations around you feel different. The places you once loved feel unfamiliar. Even your own reflection seems to carry a deeper question. This is the sudden awakening that changes everything. At first, you might try to ignore it. You tell yourself you're overthinking. You try to return to routine, to the predictable patterns that once gave you comfort. But the awakening doesn't fade. It grows stronger. It follows you into your thoughts at night and sits with you in silence during the day. It reveals truths you avoided, patterns you tolerated, and limitations you accepted. It forces you to see how small you have been living compared to what you feel called to become. This awakening often feels like disruption. Relationships begin to shift. Some people pull away without explanation. Others misunderstand your new energy. You may feel isolated, as if you are standing between two worlds, no longer belonging to your old life, yet not fully stepping into your new one. That in-between space can feel lonely and confusing. But it is sacred. It is the space where transformation takes root. You begin to notice synchronicities. Repeating numbers. Random messages that speak directly to your situation. Sudden realizations about your purpose. It feels as though the universe is communicating with you in a language only you can understand. The more you pay attention, the clearer it becomes that this awakening was not random. It was necessary. It was timed. It was meant to shake you out of comfort and into clarity. Old fears start surfacing. Doubts you buried years ago demand attention. You question your career, your friendships, your habits, your beliefs. You realize how much of your life was built on survival rather than authenticity. The awakening exposes where you shrank yourself to fit in. It shows you the moments you silenced your intuition to keep the peace. It confronts you with the truth that staying the same would be more painful than changing. Emotionally, it can feel overwhelming. You may cry for reasons you can't explain. You may feel bursts of anger at wasted time. You may experience sudden waves of motivation followed by deep exhaustion. Your nervous system is recalibrating. Your identity is shifting. You are shedding layers that once protected you but now restrict you. The awakening is not gentle because your destiny is not small. As clarity increases, so does responsibility. You can no longer pretend you don't see what you see. You can no longer tolerate environments that drain your spirit. You begin setting boundaries that once felt impossible. You start speaking truths you once swallowed. People notice the difference. Some admire it. Others resist it. The awakening reveals who supports your growth and who was only comfortable with your limitation. There is also a deep remembering that happens. A sense that you've known this path before. That your soul signed up for this expansion long before your mind understood it. You feel connected to something greater than circumstances. Challenges that once terrified you now feel like tests of alignment. You begin trusting your intuition more than outside opinions. You recognize that guidance does not always come from loud voices but from quiet inner certainty. Practical changes begin unfolding. Opportunities appear unexpectedly. Doors close abruptly. Plans fall apart in ways that redirect you towards something better aligned. What once felt like loss begins to reveal itself as protection. What once felt like rejection becomes redirection. The awakening rearranges your external world to match your internal shift. You may lose interest in gossip, drama, and shallow conversations. Your standards elevate. Your tolerance for negativity decreases. You crave meaning, depth, and authenticity. Solitude becomes nourishing instead of frightening. Silence becomes a teacher instead of an enemy. You learn to sit with yourself without distraction, and in that stillness, your vision sharpens. The sudden awakening is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before fear shaped your choices. It strips away illusions. It dismantles false identities. It confronts you with your potential and refuses to let you shrink back into comfort. It demands courage, but it also provides strength you didn't know you had. You realize that chaos is sometimes clarity in disguise. That being turned upside down is often the fastest way to see things from a higher perspective. The awakening shakes your foundation not to destroy you, but to rebuild you on truth. It disrupts your plans to align you with purpose. It challenges your ego to liberate your soul. And as everything shifts, your mindset, your relationships, your environment, you begin to feel something unfamiliar yet powerful: alignment. Not because life becomes easier, but because it becomes real. Because you are no longer pretending. Because you are finally moving in the direction that matches your spirit. Because the awakening that once felt like destruction now feels like destiny unfolding in real time. There are moments in the life of a chosen one when everything begins to fall apart at once. Plans collapse. Relationships fracture. Opportunities disappear. Stability feels like it's slipping through your fingers no matter how tightly you try to hold on. It can feel unfair, even cruel. You may ask yourself why everything is breaking when you've been trying so hard to build. But what if the collapse is not punishment? What if it is preparation? The world you created was based on who you were at that time. Your decisions were shaped by your fears, your wounds, your need for approval, and your desire to survive. You built structures that kept you safe, but not necessarily aligned. You accepted circumstances that felt secure, even if they quietly suffocated your potential. Over time, comfort became a cage. Familiarity became limitation. And deep down, your spirit knew you were meant for more. When growth becomes unavoidable, the old foundation cannot remain. The collapse begins subtly. A sense of dissatisfaction creeps in. Things that once brought excitement now feel heavy. Conversations that once felt meaningful now feel empty. You start noticing cracks in the structure of your life: inconsistencies, red flags, unspoken truths. The illusion of permanence fades. You realize that what you thought was solid was built on compromise. As the collapse accelerates, it can feel chaotic. You may lose a job you thought was stable. A relationship you invested years into may end suddenly. Financial pressure might increase. Unexpected challenges may stack on top of each other. It feels like being stripped of everything at once. Your ego panics because it equates collapse with failure. It tells you that you're falling behind, that you made mistakes, that you should have done things differently. But beneath the noise of fear, there is a deeper truth unfolding. The collapse forces clarity. It removes distractions. It exposes what was never meant to stay. The job that drained your creativity. The relationship that limited your growth. The environment that shrank your confidence. When these structures fall, it hurts because you were attached to them. You invested your identity in them. You believed they defined your worth. But the collapse is not taking your value. It is separating your value from what you built around it. In the middle of the breakdown, you may feel disoriented. The future looks uncertain. The path ahead is unclear. You may grieve the version of life you thought you would have. You may miss the comfort of predictability, even if it wasn't fulfilling. There is a mourning process that happens when old chapters close. It's not weakness. It's human. You are releasing timelines that once felt real. As painful as it is, collapse creates space. Space for new opportunities. Space for new connections. Space for a stronger foundation. When a building is structurally weak, renovation is not enough. It must be torn down and rebuilt correctly. The same is true for your life. If the foundation was built on fear, insecurity, or external validation, it cannot support the level of expansion your destiny requires. During this phase, You are being refined. Your resilience strengthens. Your discernment sharpens. You learn who truly stands with you when things are uncertain. You discover inner strength that comfort never revealed. You begin to rely less on external stability and more on internal alignment. The collapse teaches you that security is not found in circumstances but in self-trust. You start questioning everything. What do you actually want? What feels authentic? What aligns with your deeper purpose? These questions would never surface if everything remained comfortable. Stability can numb ambition. Predictability can suppress calling. Sometimes disruption is the only way to wake you up fully. As the dust settles, new perspectives emerge. You see how certain endings protected you. You recognize how some losses were necessary redirections. The relationship that ended prevented a future misalignment. The opportunity that disappeared made room for something greater. The plans that failed forced you to rethink your entire trajectory. What once looked like destruction begins to reveal itself as divine restructuring. Your priorities shift. You stop chasing things that only look good on the outside. You value peace over appearance. Alignment over approval. Growth over comfort. You become less afraid of change because you understand that change is the language of transformation. The collapse becomes less personal and more purposeful in your understanding. There is also a humbling that takes place. You release the illusion of control. You realize that not everything can be forced or preserved. You learn to surrender without giving up. Surrender is not passivity, it is trust. It is allowing the process to unfold without clinging to what is already dissolving. It is recognizing that holding onto a crumbling structure only delays the rebuild. The rebuilding phase begins quietly. New ideas spark. Fresh opportunities appear. Connections form that feel aligned rather than forced. You move differently now, slower, more intentional, more aware. You no longer build from fear of losing. You build from clarity of purpose. Your foundation is stronger because it is rooted in authenticity. What once felt like your world ending becomes the turning point that reshaped your entire direction. The collapse stripped away what was temporary so that what is permanent could emerge. It forced you to confront truths you avoided. It pushed you into growth you postponed. It removed illusions so that you could build on reality. And as you stand in the space that was once rubble, you begin to see that nothing truly valuable was lost. Only what was misaligned fell away. Only what could not support your next level dissolved. The collapse was never about destruction for the sake of pain. It was about clearing the ground so something stronger, truer, and more aligned could rise in its place. There is a calling that does not shout, yet it refuses to be silenced. It has followed you through different seasons of your life, appearing in subtle nudges, persistent dreams, and quiet dissatisfaction with anything ordinary. You may have tried to ignore it. You may have convinced yourself it was unrealistic, impractical, or too overwhelming. But no matter how far you drift, it finds its way back into your awareness. The hidden calling you can no longer ignore is not new. It has always been there, waiting for you to be ready. As a chosen one, you've likely felt different for most of your life. Not better, not superior, just different. Your sensitivity runs deep. You notice what others overlook. You feel energies shift in a room before a word is spoken. You sense when something is off, even if you cannot logically explain it. For years, you may have suppressed these instincts to fit in, to avoid standing out, to avoid being misunderstood. But suppression has a limit. Eventually, your true nature demands expression. The calling often intensifies during times of disruption. When your life feels unstable, when relationships change, when comfort dissolves, the voice becomes clearer. It asks uncomfortable questions. Why are you settling? Why are you dimming your light? Why are you living a version of life that feels safe but not fulfilling? These questions don't come to shame you. They come to awaken you. You may notice that certain paths no longer excite you. Goals that once motivated you now feel hollow. Achievements that once seemed impressive now feel empty. This isn't laziness or lack of ambition. It's evolution. Your soul is outgrowing what your ego once desired. The hidden calling begins to redirect your focus from external validation to internal alignment. At times, the calling feels inconvenient. It asks you to step outside your comfort zone. It nudges you toward risks that logic alone cannot justify. It encourages you to speak truths that might unsettle others. It invites you to explore talents you've kept hidden. You might fear failure. You might fear judgment. You might fear losing the identity you've carefully constructed. But the deeper fear is remaining stuck in a life that feels half-lived. The calling is persistent because your potential is significant. It shows up in the ideas that won't leave your mind. In the creative sparks that ignite when you least expect it. In the moments when you feel most alive, helping others, creating something meaningful, sharing insight, standing up for truth. These are clues. These are breadcrumbs leading you toward your purpose. Ignoring the calling creates tension. You feel restless even when everything appears fine on the surface. You feel unfulfilled despite meeting external milestones. There's a quiet ache that lingers, a sense that you're meant to contribute something more. That ache is not a flaw. It is guidance. It is the signal that you are capable of more than routine existence. As you begin to acknowledge the calling, resistance may surface. Doubts whisper that you're not qualified. That you're too late. That others are more prepared, more talented, more deserving. Comparison becomes a distraction. But the calling is not about competition. It is about authenticity. No one else can fulfill the role designed for you because no one else carries your exact combination of experiences, perspective, and resilience. There may be sacrifices involved. Certain relationships may shift when you step into alignment. Some people may not understand your transformation. They may prefer the version of you that was easier to predict. Growth can make others uncomfortable, especially when it challenges their own complacency. But shrinking yourself to maintain comfort is no longer an option. The calling demands integrity. As you lean into it, courage grows gradually. You start taking small steps. You explore new interests. You speak up more confidently. You set boundaries that protect your energy. You invest time in developing your gifts. With each aligned action, clarity strengthens. Fear doesn't disappear entirely, but it loses control. You begin trusting your intuition over external noise. The hidden calling is not always glamorous. It often involves discipline, patience, and consistency. It requires inner work, healing old wounds, releasing limiting beliefs, confronting insecurities. It asks you to become the person capable of carrying the vision you've been shown. This transformation is internal before it becomes external. The foundation must be strong before the impact can expand. You may notice synchronicities increasing as you align. Conversations that confirm your direction. Opportunities that appear at the right moment. Resources that become available when you commit. It feels as though the path unfolds in response to your courage. The more you honor the calling, the clearer the next step becomes. There is also a profound sense of responsibility. Once you recognize your purpose, you cannot unknow it. You cannot return to pretending you're unaware. The calling becomes a compass. It influences your decisions, your habits, your priorities. It reshapes how you spend your time and who you surround yourself with. It raises your standards because you understand that your energy is valuable. This is not about becoming someone entirely different. It is about becoming fully yourself. The calling strips away personas you adopted for survival. It removes masks you wore to gain acceptance. It reveals your core, your passion, your wisdom, your unique voice. It challenges you to live in alignment with that truth consistently. And as you continue listening, responding, and stepping forward, the once hidden calling transforms into a clear direction. What felt distant becomes tangible. What felt intimidating becomes inevitable. The life that once seemed unreachable begins forming through deliberate, aligned choices. You realize that the calling was never meant to pressure you, but to prepare you for a level of impact, fulfillment, and authenticity that can no longer be postponed.